I tried to control my husband by withholding intimacy until he submitted to my will. But now he wants a divorce. 5 years ago, I met the perfect man. Yes, literally perfect. The kind of man we all see in those cheesy romantic movies on Netflix. Tall, handsome, intelligent, caring, and to top it all off, incredibly attentive. I'm not trying to brag, but from the moment I met him, I knew I had hit the love lottery. Something few women can say these days. Our relationship was so perfect that even I sometimes wondered if it was real or if I was daydreaming. At first, everything was wonderful. We understood each other without needing to say much. We shared everything from interests to goals. And even the small daily problems were easy to solve because we always did it together. We never fought over silly things or had unnecessary drama. In fact, we always laughed at those couples who were constantly fighting and making up every 5 minutes. Our intimacy was also out of this world, spontaneous, fun, and natural. I really couldn't complain about anything. Well, until a few weeks ago at least. It all started when I decided to join some free classes offered by my city's community center. The idea was simply to socialize a bit, since I've been living here for a couple of years after moving to be with him, but I never really had the chance to make friends. Everything changed when I joined these classes and met this little group of women who seemed very nice. We became friends almost immediately, sharing experiences, going out for coffee after class, and of course, talking about our husbands. I must say, at first it all seemed quite innocent. We were just having fun chatting about everyday things, but little by little, the conversation became much more spicy and bold. In one of our chats, one of the girls very cheerfully commented that she had managed to train her husband to do whatever she wanted, using intimacy as a reward. At first, I laughed, thinking it was just a joke or an exaggeration. But when I saw the others start to nod in complicity, I was surprised and, honestly, a little intrigued. One of them, Lauren, the most brazen of the group, proudly recounted how she got her husband to buy her a very expensive handbag she had been wanting for months. She told us with a mischievous smile that she simply refused to give him any action for a whole week until he, desperate, gave in to her whim. Another friend, Ashley, claimed she convinced her husband to completely remodel their kitchen, a huge expense he initially didn't want to make. Her strategy was to offer him special intimacy every time he yielded a little. According to her, it didn't take her husband 2 weeks to accept the deal and start the renovations. I was a bit shocked, but I must admit I was also intrigued. I thought that maybe this wasn't so bad and I could try it. Just once. Just for fun. Besides, they were constantly insisting, telling me things like, "Come on, all women do it. It makes life easier." Or, "It's normal. If you can take advantage, you take advantage." The truth is, I started to feel a bit pressured. After all, these were my first friends in this country, and I didn't want to be left out of the group for seeming too naive or moralistic. So, out of curiosity, I decided to try it. The first time was something small. I wanted a necklace I'd been eyeing, and normally my husband would have agreed quickly. But this time I wanted to put into practice what I'd learned from my friends. I casually dropped that there would be a special reward if he indulged me, and to my surprise, my husband accepted. Delighted. It was very fun, and I admit I felt powerful and satisfied with the result. The next day, my friends were happy for me, celebrating my small victory as if I had won a war. I started to feel that I could really get more out of this technique. My friends, enthusiastic, pushed me to try even bigger things, assuring me that this is how you build a relationship where both parties win. With each attempt, the demands escalated. The next thing I tried was asking for a weekend at an expensive hotel he was resistant to, telling him clearly there would be no action until I had a confirmed reservation. At first, he was a little surprised, but he ended up giving in again. The girls were fascinated with me, and I felt like I was part of the club. However, deep down, a strange discomfort began to surface. I wasn't sure if this was as fun as they said. As the days went on, I saw that my friends were going further and further with their husbands, and that started to worry me. One of them directly bragged about getting a new SUV just by blackmailing him with intimacy for a whole month. Another, without hesitation, said she now had total control of her husband's finances thanks to this technique. I started to feel insecure because that wasn't what I wanted. My husband was a wonderful man, and I didn't need to manipulate him to get things. But again, I felt that group pressure to continue with the game. My last test was to ask for something big, something he really didn't want to do: change our car. He was convinced it was an unnecessary expense, but I insisted. And again, I used the intimacy technique. This time, however, my husband's reaction was completely different. For the first time, I saw him truly upset, offended, even hurt by my attitude. Honestly, I know my husband isn't stupid. He never has been. From the beginning, when I started with this training business, I noticed that he accepted it with a certain degree of humor, almost as if he saw it as an innocent game between us. At first, he seemed entertained by the dynamic, and I thought everything was under control. But the more I did it, it was obvious that he started to feel strange. There were several occasions when his look was different, less cheerful and more uncomfortable, as if wondering why I needed to resort to these weird tactics when before we simply talked things out. Finally, when it was clear what I was doing, the inevitable happened. One day, I went too far, insisting on the car change, and that's when he exploded. I remember perfectly the way he looked at me. It was a mixture of disappointment and anger I had never seen in his eyes before. It hurt me deeply, but instead of backing down, I made the biggest mistake. I defended myself in the worst possible way. He looked at me intently and said, "Seriously? Now you're using sex as a weapon to manipulate me? Do you think I'm an idiot you can control like that?" I tried to justify myself awkwardly, saying something like, "Honey, relax. It was just a joke. Something I read about. Don't take it so seriously." But he shook his head, and his expression hardened even more. "A joke? You really think playing with my feelings and treating me like your toy is funny? It makes me feel used. This isn't who we are." Or who we were. I despaired at hearing him say that. I didn't want to accept that I had damaged something between us. I was so ashamed that instead of admitting my mistake, I ended up snapping back even harder. "See? This is why I can't even talk to you anymore. Everything offends you, everything bothers you. I don't even recognize the fun man I fell in love with." He was silent for a few seconds, clearly hurt by what I said, until he finally replied firmly, "I don't recognize the woman I fell in love with either. And if you keep behaving like this, the best thing for us to do is get a divorce." It was the first time I felt that my husband, who had always been there to support me, didn't understand me at all. The word divorce echoed in my head like something unreal. I never thought our marriage could reach that point, especially over something that started as a game. After that argument, we spent several days practically ignoring each other. I tried to act like the same person as before, but the tension was still there. Absurdly, instead of fixing things, I made another serious mistake. I tried to manipulate him again. I naively believed that if I showed him I still had control, we could go back to normal, that he would calm down and understand it was just a couple's dynamic. But this time, it didn't work at all. He stopped me in my tracks, looking at me with sadness and frustration, saying clearly, "Stop. Seriously, this isn't you. I feel like you're not the same woman I loved anymore. If this is going to continue, we're over." I was completely confused and hurt. I thought he was overreacting. I refused to accept my responsibility, so at the next meeting with my friends, I decided to tell them everything that had happened, hoping for some kind of support or advice. But instead, their reaction surprised me even more. They told me something I never expected to hear. "Maybe he's not the one for you, friend. Look, if you want, we can introduce you to someone else. A friend of ours has always been interested in you. We just hadn't told you before because it was obvious you loved your husband too much. But now that he's showing his true colors, maybe you could give yourself a chance with someone who really values you." The surprise was enormous. At first, I felt offended and said firmly, "No, girls, please, I love my husband. I can't do that to him." They looked at me as if I were naive for insisting on repairing my marriage, but I wasn't willing to give up on it. However, to my own shame, in the deepest part of my mind, a small part of me felt curious. For the first time since we got married, I briefly contemplated what it would be like to be with someone else. Someone who might not confront me so much. Someone who might be easier to handle. Thinking I could use that idea a little to regain my husband's attention and interest, I came up with an absurd and desperate plan. I decided to start dressing up more, wearing more provocative clothes, and going out more often with my friends, hoping he would think there was someone else and that would somehow motivate him to step up and win me back. Yes, now that I say it out loud, I realize how stupid it sounds, but at that moment, it seemed like a good idea. And with the constant approval of my circle of friends, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. Of course, everything went exactly the opposite way. My husband wasn't jealous or remotely interested in winning me back. On the contrary, he became even more distant and disappointed. One day, he finally confronted me and asked directly if there was someone else. He did it with such calmness and coldness that I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was then that I clearly saw the damage I had caused with my stupid games. I confessed that there was no one else, that I just wanted his attention, that I wanted to go back to how we were before. But he, with sadness in his eyes, replied, "I don't know if that's possible. After all this, I don't know what to trust. I don't even know who you are anymore." So here I am now, confused, ashamed, and desperate. How could I turn a perfect relationship into something so broken and complicated? I know I ruined everything, and I need honest advice on how to fix this mess before it's too late. Update 1. It's been a few weeks since my last post here on Reddit, and honestly, things haven't gone at all as I hoped. I don't even know where to begin, so I'll try to tell everything step by step, even though it hurts to admit some of the mistakes I've made lately. First, I want to thank everyone for the comments I received on my previous post. Some of you were pretty harsh, saying things like I had destroyed my marriage through my own immaturity, but there were others who tried to understand me and give me honest advice on how to repair the damage I had done. The truth is, I felt I had to do something urgently because I was really watching my life fall apart. With all this confusion, I decided to talk to my friends again. I thought they could give me some useful advice on how to reconcile with my husband, but I was completely wrong. Far from helping, they recommended I do the exact opposite of what you all advised me here. They told me I had to act as if I were the offended one, that I should play hard to get because supposedly that way he would come back crawling to ask for my forgiveness. That it was a matter of holding firm until he gave in. According to them, showing that I was hurt and emotionally distancing myself was the best strategy to win him back. But now I realize how absurd their suggestions were. Since we still live in the same house, the situation has become quite uncomfortable since our last fight. I moved into the guest room. It's not that he explicitly asked me to, but his coldness was so unbearable that I felt it was the way to mentally survive this situation. The worst part is that if we formally separate, I would have to return to my home country, as I have no family here. To make matters worse, my husband has been the sole provider since I moved in with him. Returning to my country would mean my husband would have to pay for my plane ticket, something that seems too humiliating to me. The other option would be to ask my parents to send me money, but the mere idea makes me feel even more ashamed. I don't want to imagine the disappointment on their faces when they find out the reason my marriage ended, especially considering my husband was always an exemplary man. So for now, we remain trapped in this strange limbo, separated but living together. In the midst of all this emotional disaster, I made the worst possible decision. Remember my friends had mentioned a friend of theirs who was interested in me? Well, a few days ago, in a moment of desperation and probably driven by my own wounded pride, I agreed to go out with him. I'm not proud of this, but I wanted to feel desired again, even if just for a moment, and also to try to forget all the chaos I had caused in my marriage. The date was at a simple coffee shop. The guy was attractive, I admit, but from the first moment I noticed his intentions were quite shallow. He didn't seem interested in getting to know me for real. He just wanted to flirt superficially and see if he could get something quick. I knew perfectly well what he wanted, but at that moment I was so disappointed in myself, so desperate to feel something again, that I agreed when he directly invited me to a hotel after coffee. I won't go into many details because, frankly, they're not worth remembering. But I can say that after that day, I have heard absolutely nothing from him again. Literally, the guy disappeared from my life as soon as we left. My friends later confirmed, between uncomfortable laughs, that he had told them there was no chemistry, and that's why he decided not to contact me again. To be honest, that hurt me a lot because even though I knew I shouldn't have done it, I at least hoped that encounter would make me feel a little less miserable. But no, it only made me feel even more empty. The worst part is, I feel so guilty about what I did that I tried again to approach my husband to fix things, this time with sincerity and real regret. But he wants nothing to do with me anymore. I told him I was willing to do whatever it took to get our relationship back, but his response was devastating. "I'm sorry, but I don't trust you anymore. You destroyed the most valuable thing we had, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you the same way again." Hearing that was devastating. I realize now, more than ever, that I have ruined something wonderful by following stupid and superficial advice from people who clearly understood nothing about what it means to have a healthy relationship. And worse, I realize I did it for no reason. I had a happy marriage. I had a husband who loved me deeply, and I threw it all away to play a game I didn't understand. I'm at this point, trapped in a foreign country, in a house where I'm no longer welcome, and completely alone because those supposed friends only made things worse with their terrible advice. I know now I should have never listened to them, and that I should have trusted what I had at home instead of trying to turn my relationship into something it wasn't. I'm writing this here not only to vent, but also to warn other women who might be considering listening to similar advice. Value what you have before you lose it over nonsense. Right now, I don't know what to do. I feel desperate and lost, and the only thing I wish is that I could go back in time and not have ruined my marriage. But since that's impossible, all I can do is own my mistakes and find a way to move forward, although I have no idea how to do it. Do you think there's still any possibility of getting my husband back? Or is this completely over? I really need your advice now more than ever. Update 2. Well, here I am again. This time, from the airport, with my life packed into a suitcase, waiting for a flight that will leave in a few hours to take me back to my parents. I'm officially divorced. Yes, you read that right. What started as a perfect marriage ended up like this, and honestly, I still find it hard to believe. My husband finally decided to divorce me. To be honest, I tried until the very last moment to fix things between us, but he was already clear on what he wanted. He told me he had lost trust in me and that our relationship no longer made sense. That hurt so much, especially because I loved him deeply, and I still feel we could have resolved things more calmly. However, I suppose he had already made his decision, and the only thing I could do was accept it. I must admit that despite everything that happened, he has behaved like a gentleman to the end. I don't know if I ever mentioned it clearly here, but since I moved to his country with him, I stopped working and he became the sole provider for our household. That's why when we agreed on the divorce, one of my biggest fears was how I would return to my country without having to ask my parents for help, something that honestly would have been too humiliating for me. However, my husband solved that for me. He told me he would cover the cost of the plane ticket and ensure I could return to my parents peacefully. He had no legal obligation to do so, but he did it anyway. That gesture, though kind, also hurt a lot because it signified the definitive end of what we had built together. Before leaving for the airport, we had our last conversation, probably the most awkward and painful of all. I told him I was sorry things ended this way, that I regretted listening to so much bad advice and especially trusting the wrong people. He listened patiently, and although he was serious and distant, his response left me a little calmer. "Look, I genuinely want you to be happy. I hope you go back to your family and can start over from scratch. I hold no grudges. I only wish the best for you." It was in that moment that I understood there was no turning back. But at least I knew he didn't hate me, and that was a small comfort. I thanked him for the years together and apologized again for allowing other people to negatively influence our relationship. It was awkward to say because admitting I was so easily influenced was also acknowledging that perhaps I was naive to believe that those supposed friends really had good intentions for me. And this is where I want to be clear. It was them, those supposed friends I met in the community center classes, who ruined everything. I know at some point I got carried away by their advice, but how was I supposed to know they were guiding me so wrongly? I just wanted to fit in, to have new friends. And they took advantage of that to put absurd ideas in my head about how to manipulate my husband using things that should never have been used as a game. Now that I'm sitting here at the airport, I see it all more clearly. I suppose trying to fit in a foreign country made me let my guard down, trusting the wrong people and consequently ending up like this, divorced and with nothing. My husband was always a good person to me, and although it hurts that he didn't want to give us another chance, I recognize that at some point he was also a victim of these external manipulations. I know I can't change the past, but I can warn anyone who is reading this. Be very careful with the advice you accept from others. Sometimes those who smile the most or seem to support us are precisely the ones who can destroy our happiness. Today, I leave with that bitter lesson learned. I don't want to blame myself anymore. I didn't ruin this. If I hadn't listened to that absurd advice, I would still be happily married.